As a small business owner, you are probably in one of two camps. You've either fully adopted generative AI and it's something that you're making part of your everyday operations, or maybe it's something that you really haven't embraced yet. But either way, we know that that is something that a lot of your potential clients likely are using and using as a tool in their everyday business. And so why does this matter and why do we care? Why we care is because whereas formerly we were pretty sure that people go to Google or another search engine to try and find people who provide your business. Now, one of the things we know is actually people are using ChatGPT, Perplexity, and other generative AI tools to answer those same questions. So my name is Erika Dickstein, and I'm here with my colleague,
Laura Mayer.
we're from Spring Insight. And so what we wanted to chat about today is generative AI optimization for small businesses and why you, as somebody who works at a small business or owns a small business, should care about this. So Laura, let's talk about the problem, right?
Yeah.
Companies understand and have heard for years about sort of what is traditional SEO, search engine optimization. And that's focused on getting people to type in keywords, right? But now we're in this new era. Generative AI platforms like ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, they're answering the questions directly, and they're not showing a list of websites, right? It's just a completely different way of approaching that conversation. And if your business isn't being cited, or if you're not thinking about how you become part of that conversation, you're no longer anywhere in the picture. It's not even about losing a percentage. It's not falling lower in rankings, right? It's about just being completely invisible. So let's start out at a big picture. What is generative AI optimization, or for our sake here, we're going to just refer to as GAO?
Okay. All right. Yeah. GAO, because I don't think anyone's calling it really anything yet. So you heard it here first. It's GAO, right? Well, from a digital technical project manager's perspective, right? Like before when we are designing a site and thinking of strategy and thinking of search and those sorts of things, we're thinking about the humans and we're thinking about the bots, right? And there's sort of two different things. How it looks and how it acts in the back end could have been a different approach. But now we're building sites thinking forwardly for bots that think like humans. So first off, regardless, right, we still have to always produce good content, and that's key. EEAT. We want authority, expertise. I said it backwards, but experience, expertise, and trustworthiness, right? Because that's what the AI models are looking for. So that's important. There are lots of technical pieces, though, that we want to put in there as well.
You know, if you think about sort of the old-fashioned SEO tactics, it's about understanding what are the keywords that you're trying to rank for and making sure, whether you call it stuffing or however, making sure that you're utilizing those keywords, right? But in this new world, it's truly about answering questions. It's about understanding what are the questions that are being asked and how do you contextualize the services that you provide by answering those specific questions, so that when somebody does ask a search engine the question, you are providing the correct answers, right?
Yeah, so I think it's really important, as we're thinking not just about the front end, but those back end things that we put in. What are those little extras, those little extra bits of stuff, of information that will make your site, make your content look more authoritative, look more trustworthy? It's little things like perhaps adding author bylines with credentials, right? That's something we can add to content. Always using reputable sources and linking to their published work. That's important. Consistent branding and tone is something that is very key too. If you have a lot of blogs on your site, if you have a lot of content, you want to make sure all the branding and all the voice is consistent, because that's something that these generative AI is going to look at as well. And testimonials and case studies, right? They're gold. They show that you're an expert. They show that you know what you're talking about, and it supports your credibility and trust.
Yeah. I'm going to go back though, because I don't think we fully explored sort of this idea of what are the questions. And I think to these generative AI tools, What are they doing? They are answering questions, and they are answering questions using or not using your content. And so thinking about that and thinking about the content that you want to write in terms of answering those questions is truly essential. So think about it. In a prior world, when you're thinking about search engine optimization, you might have said something like, we offer fractional CPA services, right? Now that is not a question, right? The
Mhm.
question is, what is a fractional CPA service and what benefit does it provide? So
Mhm.
you're answering throughout the content of your website. You have to be answering those questions to be able to sort of create right opportunities for these generative AI tools.
Yeah, and so, piggybacking on that, that's why things like FAQ pages are very important, right? That
Absolutely.
answers questions, leads to your authority and your trustworthiness. And then also, what is often overlooked, we see this in the back end on the development side, is the headings aren't clearly structured. Your H1s, your H2s, your H3s, these are all things that these generative AI models are going to use to provide their answer to their user.
No, that's absolutely right. And I would go even a step further. One of the things that we're seeing now, you mentioned FAQ pages. One of the things that I'm seeing now as people become more aware of GAO is it's not even, you don't even see FAQ pages any longer. You see content that is your normal content that has FAQ afterwards. So you're sprinkling, you're not sort of isolating FAQ. Oh, yes, here's an FAQ section, but instead you're actually creating content and then putting FAQ on every page so that you're always answering those questions. So let's talk a bit more sort of about the basics and how it works. We've sort of started to delve into that, obviously, as we talk about FAQ and FAQ frameworks. Let's talk also, because this is so essential, is about schema markup. And I think we try really hard on our channel not to use terminology that isn't terminology that small business owners use all the time, so not to talk to tech. It's kind of impossible with this topic. So let's go at a high level. What is schema markup, Laura? And then we can talk about why it's really essential as you delve into this area.
Yeah, that's a good question. So schema markup can be kind of abstract concept to understand for us humans, but what it is it really gives like a cheat sheet to your website as far as what information is prepared for you. So you can think of it a little bit like if you went to a grocery store and you had a bunch of unlabeled cans, right? That's your website without schema. What schema does is a clear labeling of the instructions, the information that's on your website, so that the algorithms can quickly find and match the intent of the user's search with the information on your site.
Yeah,
And there
absolutely.
are
I think
many
that's a
different kinds, right? There are many different types. Do you want to explain those a little bit? Maybe that's a little high level for this conversation.
No, but what I think is important is not what the different types are, absolutely, but to know that the different kinds match up the different kind of content, right? So what it's basically doing, as Laura said, it is making it as easy as possible, not just for generative AI or whatever search tool somebody is using to find the answers to the question, but to understand what kind of content is being offered on that page. It's shorthand for any of these bots, basically, to understand that here we are talking about a person, we are talking about a service, right? So it knows exactly what it is, and it has those pieces in the right place to be able to go through them.
I'd say, like, if your website is a great big book, schema is a table of contents that helps the user quickly get to the kind of the information they want to get to.
Yeah, and a page level table of contents, right? Because it's going to show where each of the pieces are on that individual page. It's a great way of putting it. So, making sure, because not every website, this is not something that was standard operating procedure for every single page. And so a lot of pages, a lot of websites don't necessarily have this, but making sure that you adopt this on your site, hugely beneficial. Next, we talked about, and we've already talked about this quite a bit, which is the answer-oriented content, making sure that you're constantly answering questions. And then finally, Laura, you actually also touched on this with credibility signals. So do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit, like adding author bylines or linking to credible sources, that kind of stuff. And those things are really, really easy to implement, right? When you're making the content. So it's just being thoughtful for every little detail of information that you could possibly include to make it easier for whatever entity is searching your information.
Absolutely. So, this is a fruitful and rosy conversation. This is, we have highlighted a way to adopt things that bring your organization forward. But I kind of feel as if we wouldn't be doing, anybody who's watching this, we'd be doing a disservice if we didn't talk about some of the risks, though, that we're talking, the risks of the implementation of generative AI optimization. And this is particularly because I'm really seeing this as I delve into this topic. So the biggest risk that I see of engaging with it, right? So first, let's talk about the risk of engaging. The risk of engaging is that you really are creating information that is set up to answer questions for generative AI. There is no guarantee that generative AI references you
Right.
when they take that information.
And that is right. So there's a bit of goodwill when we're producing content as well. You may or may not get credit for whatever it is you're producing there.
Yeah, I mean, this is being spoken about at scale about generative AI. And so nobody watching this will be like, wait, what? Generative AI doesn't give credit? Like, this is something that's being talked about at a societal level. So it's not surprising that you would talk about it on an individual business level, that you are, if you are going back to that question, what is if you write content that is, what is a fractional CPA, right? You're writing that content. That's actually probably a very general one that it's going to get a lot of information from. But if you work, let's say, in a much smaller industry where, it's much more niche and you write content and it takes content from you, it might not be looking at this huge pool of data. It could literally just be taking an answer from something that it has learned from you and a very few others, and not referencing you.
Definitely. But I think you still have to do it, right? I mean, I think the cost of not thinking in that capacity and using that kind of strategy has a bigger risk of being harmful to your organization than implementing it.
Yeah, that's, I think, the other side of the risk is the risk of not engaging at all. It feels very much like the sort of head in the sand approach of, well, if I ignore it, then it'll just go away. Generative AI, from everything that we're seeing, it is being embraced more every day. It is something that you see it is worse today than it ever will be again, and it is less integrated into society today than it ever will be again. So if you decide you're not going to engage in it, then other people probably, because I'm going to assume if you're watching our video, you're very good at what you do. You are an expert. And so people who aren't as good as you can embrace this and get out there in the wild, wild west. And as this does continue to evolve and we do learn more, you're further behind in being able to implement it, because this is still an area that I know that we at Spring Insight and everybody we follow is truly still figuring out. I know that I've been in a deep rabbit hole of learning on this for couple of months. And one of the things that I've been really shocked by is there's nobody out there to learn from who's the expert. There's a lot of people who are looking at it, but we're all just figuring it out, right? So the longer that you say, no, I'm not going to engage, the further the catch up will be to get there.
Yeah, I think that's when it just comes down to and there's also all this talk, and this is outside of this of our topic today, but someday Google is not going to be the king of all search, right? Things will change. They will change. So don't panic. Don't freak out. The main thing is, if your content is good, if you're answering questions, if you've got all the technical things that you can possibly do to make your content easy to find and easy to understand and to organize, then you're in good shape. Like, that's half the battle. That is more than half the battle right there. Stay the course, do good stuff, produce good content, have a clean and an executable technical strategy in your back end, and you should be in good shape.
Well, with that, I mean, that says everything. So thank you to everybody. Thank you, Laura, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody who's listening. So this month, actually, this month of June, we're going to stick with this topic, generative AI optimization, for the entire month. This video is sort of our big picture where we talk about this in a very general term. We're actually going to break down over the course of the next month the various industry groups that we serve: subject matter experts, government contractors, associations, and local businesses. And we're going to talk in a much more specialized way about each of those industries, and generative AI optimization might work better on the individual level. So if you've enjoyed this, I hope you'll like it. I really hope you'll subscribe so you know when those additional videos come out. And if this is something that's interesting to you and you want to talk about generative AI and how you might start thinking about that for your business, please go to our website, springinsight, springinsight.com, and set up a time for a consultation. Laura, thanks.
Thank you, Erika.